So in today's video, I thought I'd do something a little bit more personal. I know that ranked tier lists are a dime a dozen, and, I've done a few on my other channel about, my favourite shows and characters, but this one is specifically relating to lightsaber duels. And I think the interesting thing with lightsaber duels is that they tend to go a little bit unnoticed by people when it comes to, what it is that they actually like about a lightsaber duel. We all have different opinions. Very much like with movies, we all like certain things. Some people like the sequels, some people don't. Some people like the prequels, some people don't. And for a number of reasons. And I'm always interested in seeing what people think about the specific, lightsaber duels in Star Wars. Because I think it shows you more about what their actual taste is and what it is that, attracts them to Star Wars itself, whether it is the flashy choreography, whether it's the emotion, whether it's the setting. There is always something different that everyone appreciates. And so I wanted to run through a list of all of the major lightsaber duels in Star Wars and just kind of give you my opinions on them so that you can know what I appreciate. Because I'm pretty certain that you all won't agree with my list. But, that's the beauty of us all being individuals. So I'm going to start off from left to right here on the way this list is set out. I didn't make this list, it's just one that I found online. But I think, it's got all of the major duels included, as well as, a couple from Clone Wars and Rebels. So, yes, let's start with the duel on Bespin. Cloud City, Luke and Vader. I think, this is perhaps one of the most iconic duels in the entire franchise. It's probably what, first really gave fans a distinct image of Jedi versus Sith, the entire setting around Cloud City, the carbonite chamber, the, low lighting levels, just the ominous presence of Vader. The setting itself is what really sets this apart for me. There is a lot of emotion to the fight. Luke desperately is trying just to survive. Vader is toying with him. And, in the end, when Luke does actually land a blow against Vader, that's when Vader actually turns it up. And, well, we see what happens as Luke loses a hand. And it kind of shows you that if Vader had been going 100% from the start, Luke could very easily have lost immediately. But, for me, it's more about the visualization of the fight. This is kind of a classic original trilogy style where it's quite slow, a little clumsy. You have to remember as well, that neither Mark Hamill nor David Prowse are trained in the ways of sword combat. I know that they did their best to train them as they could. So it does have that kind of slow, distinctive style. Now this, for me, goes into the A tier because, again, there is a lot of imagery behind it. It is iconic. I like the psychology of the duel. And again, it's just a very well-paced, well-thought-out, lightsaber duel itself. So we'll move on to the next one, which is the first duel from Revenge of the Sith, which is Anakin and ObiWan versus Dooku. Now, the prequels definitely changed it up when it came to the lightsaber fights. George wanted it to be flashier, quicker, because this is Jedi in, their prime. And I can appreciate that. It's not necessarily my style. I don't always think that faster and more intense is always better. But I can appreciate, obviously, that you want to see the Jedi in their prime. A fully trained Jedi versus a fully trained Sith. And, this fight is quite short in comparison to the others in the film. It's there to serve a purpose. It's there to show, not just the downfall of Count Dooku, but it's also there to show Anakin's first temptation to the dark side and how Palpatine can influence him. Obi-Wan gets taken out of the fight pretty quickly, which is disappointing, but I get that they want to just focus on Anakin. But for me, it's a solid fight. I'd put it probably down in B. There's nothing too much wrong with it. It's just, it is what it is, so... we move on to The Last Jedi, and I don't know if you could necessarily consider this a lightsaber duel, seeing as no lightsabers actually ever connect. And Luke isn't actually there. Again, this is more about the visualization, the psychology. For me, what always bugged me about this is that I understand that this is a forced projection of Luke, and that, Kylo hasn't seen him in probably 10 years. So he wants to project himself as Kylo knew him, which is why he looks younger, but it still doesn't explain why he has Anakin's lightsaber. Luke had his green Return of the Jedi saber at all points in Kylo and Ben Solo's life. And so, Kylo Ren, I'm getting the names confused, but Kylo Ren should have instantly recognized that, hey, that's the saber that I broke apart just 5 minutes ago. And that should have taken him immediately out of whatever it was, whatever trap that Luke was trying to lay for him. The specifics of the duel itself, really short. It's more just about the psychology. It's not terrible. It's not great in my opinion. I put it in as a C. Again, I think that they could have, if they'd had the green saber, it would have lent a lot more towards the deception side of things. I get that they're trying to make it out that Kylo is so angry that he can't pay attention to his wider surroundings. It's there to show us that Luke has accepted, his history and his place back with the Force. So I understand the deeper meaning, but when you look at it just on a base level, it's pretty average, in my opinion. So we have the fight at the end of The Phantom Menace, set to the soundtrack of Duel of the Fates, which I think is probably the most iconic lightsaber duel music there is. And again, this was our first, real foray into the full capabilities of Jedi in this era. Extremely fast-paced. The setting itself was really interesting. The only gripe that I have with this, other than Qui-Gon dying, which again I accept as, a consequence of having to move the story forward. You can't have these characters linger for too long, especially when you've got Obi-Wan and Anakin to focus on. I think the idea that Maul dies is a shame in my book. They could have done so much more with Darth Maul. But also, the kind of, I get how they wanted to separate them with those red laser gates, but, they showed us at the beginning of the movie, Jedi can use, super speed, and yet Obi-Wan doesn't. Again, he's a Padawan at this point, so maybe he isn't thinking right, but, this is still definitely up there. It's an A for me. There's those little things that just take it away, but it's not, again, it's one of the best combats, in the entire series, so I don't want to demean that in any way, shape, or form. By all means, A, in my books, is excellent. S is the step above. S is like, nothing can beat this. I think too many people are tempted to put everything into S because they just really like it. I think S should be limited to 1 or 2 extra special duels beyond that. So we've got the same film, The Phantom Menace, and the very short duel between Qui-Gon and Maul. Maul using just his single blade, and I think this was, again, just to kind of give us a bit of a teaser of what's to come. To kind of show us what Maul can do, the fact that he can stand up to, Qui-Gon on his own without any issue. Again, for me, I'd probably put this into the C category. It's very short, it's not very substantial, it serves a purpose, and that's it, really. So we come to the Luke versus Vader duel on the Death Star in Return of the Jedi, and this is going to be my S tier pick. For me, again, the soundtrack, the emotion, the back and forth on the fight, all to the setting of the Battle of Endor in the background, the way it's interspersed with, those space battle scenes, and just seeing Luke go through that journey of realization and him bringing back Anakin, also while you've got Ian McDiarmid in the background being absolutely delightful as the Emperor. This for me is the most special duel in the entirety of the show, and I think that nothing so far has matched it in my opinion. It's definitely my favourite. It goes into the S tier for me, and I love that film specifically for that scene. I know that Return of the Jedi has a lot of people that say, well, it's not the best, it's not even that great, and yet it definitely has its issues, but for me that duel alone puts it into the greats for me. So we move on to Twilight of the Apprentice, the duel between Ahsoka and Vader in Rebels at the very end of season 2, and again, this was a build-up. Ahsoka, who has clearly a lot of history, realizing that this is Anakin, coming down face to face with Anakin, and, you know, at the point that we were watching this, I remember, you know, because this was, you gotta remember, this was the end of Season 2 of Rebels, so we didn't have any announcements for the Clone Wars Season 7, we didn't have the Ahsoka show, we didn't even have a hint there was going to be any live action stuff. I think a lot of people were convinced that Ahsoka was going to die, you know, which they could have done, and they definitely tried to lean into at the end of the fight before, you know, everything got turned around in the show's finale. I loved this duel. This duel is great. You know, it showed off why animation really does have its place. You know, you lean in from Kanan and Ezra being clearly outmatched by Vader to then having Ahsoka, and, you know, that first moment where, you know, she strikes Vader and you see the helmet revealed, you hear Matt Lanter's voice mixed in with, you know, Vader's voice. And I know that they copied this in Kenobi, and it kind of annoyed me a little bit, the Kenobi one. Because, you know, for me, it was kind of like, you're just copying what happened here, so it doesn't have as much emotional feel for me at that point. Anyone who'd seen Rebels, I thought, might have felt the same way. I get that people who maybe hadn't seen Rebels, that would have been a great moment, but it just felt a bit cheap. It was done so much better here, and this goes into the A column for me. So, we move on to the second of the sequel Saber Duels. And, you know, again, this is... I'm just noticing now on the list that it doesn't have some of the duels. I'm guessing this was released before Episode 9, because it doesn't have the Kylo Ren Rey duel on the Death Star. But I mean, I'd put that down at a C anyway, if that's what you were interested in knowing, because I don't think it was that great. The moment with Han Solo afterwards was much better. You know, the movie in general was just a bit rubbish. You know, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you know, that duel was probably a C level for me. This one in the forest with Rey and Kylo, my God, I absolutely loved the setting. The idea of it being a frozen forest, you know, it just mesmerized me watching it in the cinema. And I love the idea of two rookies just really going at it. They had a great style, a kind of wild style that had a little bit of that flair of the prequels. You know, you can tell Kylo's a bit more trained, but Rey has been, you know, using her staff her whole life. She knows how to swing a weapon. You know, and again, people go on about, oh, how did Rey beat him? And it's like, take the psychology into account. Firstly, Kylo's extremely injured. He's unbalanced because he's just killed his own father, which Snoke even mentions, you know, it's split him to the bone. You know, so he's not here full power, and he is still in training. He's not a fully trained, you know, dark side user at this point. So I think people hark on it too much. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I put it up there in the A tier. I really do love that duel. And likewise, the very short duel beforehand with Finn, again, gives you a bit of flair with Kylo. He does a few twirls. Finn holds his own for a little while, but I appreciate the fact that Kylo pretty much ends this quite quickly. Again, giving you a bit of an idea that, you know, Finn, whilst he is a competent fighter, having been a stormtrooper, you know, he's not quite as skilled with, you know, a melee weapon. You know, so he's only had basic combat training, really. So I put that into the B tier. Again, the setting is still great. Seeing, you know, the disheveled Kylo Ren without his helmet, fantastic. Now we have the duel on Tatooine once again in Rebels Season 3, I think it was, with Kenobi and Maul, ending this story once and for all. And I remember at the time everyone was looking forward to this, everyone was excited, everyone was like, this is going to be a great duel. And it's over in about 2 seconds. And for me, that's what really makes it as good as any duel in, you know, the series. It is fantastically well thought out. You know, this is an experienced Obi-Wan Kenobi who is, you know, he's overcome all of his emotional trauma from the past. He is, you know, his mind is clear. He knows what he needs to do. And so this is kind of like a Jedi Master at play against an enraged, fallen dark side user who is only out for one thing. And this is the way it should go. You know, this is the ideal Master Jedi scenario. He thinks about it. He knows how Maul works. He lures him into a false sense of security by using Qui-Gon's stance. And then knowing how he killed Qui-Gon, he uses that to his advantage. And in 2 sweeps, he's dead. And then you get that moment at the end with Maul where he asks, is he the chosen one? And it's kind of like Maul's redemption. And in that moment, all of their history just fades away. So I put that up to S tier. Again, that might shock some people, but for me, the thoughtfulness, the psychology behind it is more than the choreography. So yeah. Up next, we have Obi-Wan and General Grievous. The first time we get to see General Grievous in action as he folds out his forearms. We get this is just meme worthy. We get hello there, we get General Kenobi, you are a bold one. It's just filled with meme gold. The fight itself, again, is pretty impressive, seeing Obi-Wan have to really go on the back foot against 4 sabers. It's the first time we get any kind of a helicopter effect, which I'm not a fan of in the Inquisitor's side of things. But, here it's used to much more of a logical purpose to form some kind of a barrier, between Grievous and Kenobi. It is very short. I think if you were to add into this the fight on the platform, which I know technically wasn't a lightsaber fight because Kenobi uses a blaster, it's pretty solid. I'd put it in there at a B just for the meme worthiness. Now, Anakin and ObiWan versus Dooku in Attack of the Clones. Again, this is a bit shorter because we all know what they were trying to get to at the very end of it. I think it's important for this because it shows Anakin is still very, very inexperienced, very prideful. He charges in at Dooku and it costs him an arm. Almost costs Obi-Wan as well. Obi-Wan, they're both clearly outmatched. If Yoda doesn't show up, they're both dead. It's okay. It's kind of... Yeah, I don't know. I'm just... Attack of the Clones isn't one of my favourite films, just given the way it's not aged particularly well. So I'll put it in at a C. Now, we have Palpatine, or Darth Sidious, I should say, versus Mace Windu. Mace Windu, who's been in the news a lot recently because Samuel Jackson wants more of him. I think that, maybe having an animated show showing his earlier years is fine. I don't think he should have survived. He really shouldn't. It doesn't make sense. And it demeans the idea of death in Star Wars even more. It doesn't make sense to have Mace Windu survive the events. Because then you ask the question, what the hell has he been doing all this time? I just want characters to stay dead just for once. This is, again, a relatively short duel. It's more about setting Anakin up for his turn to the dark side. One thing I do like is that Palpatine seems to get rid of the 3 other Jedi Masters fairly quickly, so we can focus on Mace. And it does kind of show you why Mace is considered the best duelist in the whole order. Yoda's more powerful, but as a duelist, Mace Windu is the cream of the crop. And, he defeats Palpatine. He does. He defeats Sidious. It's only Anakin coming in at the last moments. And people speculate, did Sidious let him burn his face? Did he let him win to encourage Anakin to turn? I don't think he did. I think, Windu is a better duelist than Palpatine. And it's for a reason I'll mention when we come up to, Sidious's fight with Yoda at the very end. So I'm going to put this in at a B. It's pretty solid. Now we have the original lightsaber duel, the very first one, Vader and ObiWan on the Death Star. And again, this is clearly something that, is more about the emotion than it is about the choreography. It's not aged particularly well, especially before it was touched up in the special editions. Technology at the time was not brilliant, and so there were times where the sabers looked colourless or would fade out. Again, this is an old man in Alec Guinness against, an untrained person in David Prowse. So this isn't great by any means in terms of the choreography, but the emotion in it, the music, the meaning behind it is great. I put it in at a B. I think it's good. It's not fantastic. It's good, and it sets up what's to come, I think. It has a deeper meaning in that sense. So, Yoda versus Dooku. Now, this is going to be probably the first controversial one for me, if there hasn't already been one anyway. I did not like this duel. At the time, I really liked it, but at the time, I was about 14 years old in the cinema, and, I think everyone just wants to watch Yoda spin around and have a lightsaber fight because that's all we ever wanted to see. But when you think back on it, the fight's kind of stupid. It starts out well, with them using their feats of the Force, and Dooku, by all means, is a strong Force user, but he is not supposed to be as strong as Yoda. in the Force. I believe he could match him, strike for strike with a lightsaber blade. But I'm not sure, the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, who's been revered for hundreds of years, would be, defeated by, Count Dooku, with all due respect to him. And, again, it's flashy, it's there for show, it's totally George Lucas's prequels, and, I just look at it with a bit of a bored kind of eye. I kind of just sit through it and endure it. This is going into the D pile. This is not great, in my opinion. It's not terrible, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think it's good, It just doesn't make logical sense for me. And, again, the badly aged CGI does not help either. Yoda doesn't look great. It looks like they're on a blue screen set. So, I try and distance myself from that, but I don't like it. So we have the very first proper lightsaber duel between Vader and Kanan and Ezra at the end of Season 1 of Star Wars Rebels. And, again, this was short. It was sweet. Again, just showed you how powerful Vader was. It did what it needed to do, so I'm not really going to say much else. I'm going to put it in at a C. Now, this is probably the one that everyone sat there thinking, well, this has surely got to be an S tier, hasn't it? This, massively, revered fight scene at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Master versus Apprentice. Friend against friend. Brother against brother. The Battle of Geonosis. And I would say that, yes, this is definitely an emotionally charged fight. And, it is very well planned, very well choreographed. The CGI hasn't aged as badly. Certainly it's something that you can go back and rewatch without being distracted by it. For me, what takes it down from being an S tier to an A tier is the fact that it is a bit too long. The emotion is there at the very beginning, it's there at the very end, but there is a chunk in the middle where they are just doing things to be flashy, where I lose that connection to the story with it. It's kind of like sometimes you can drag it on too long, and when you do, it becomes a bit of a burden, and it takes you out of the moment. Like I say, sometimes keeping it shorter is better. Less is more. And that was the case with this one. It's still a great fight, again, with a great soundtrack, and the actors do an absolutely amazing job of, actually performing the moves. It must have taken months and months and months to learn it. So I give all credit to everyone involved. Nick Gillard, obviously Hayden and, Ewan for their dedication to it. And, again, it is a very well planned out, and the scene is very emotional. It's very well acted. I just think that, it was a little bit too long, and that's what takes it down for me, just from that S tier to an A tier. And then we come to the last, Yoda versus Sidious. Again, and this kind of plays into what I was saying about Yoda in the Dooku fight. Neither of these characters realistically should need to be pulling out their lightsabers. They are masters of the Force on opposite ends. And whilst it's great to see, two characters that are at the peak of their power go at it with lightsabers, for me, it makes more sense for them to go at it with their Force powers. And, Palpatine is... let's face it, Ian McDiarmid, once again, is not a trained combat artist. He is a classically trained actor, and you can tell. There is some awkwardness in his movements. Again, the spinny Yoda makes it a little bit distracting. I've never been one for the Yoda fight style where he's just doing flip after flip after flip. Because this is a guy who dies 20 years later of old age in a species that lives to maybe over 1,000. So maybe I'm thinking about it too logically, but, for me, that's how my brain works. I would have preferred this duel to be mostly Force using, and I know that it does come to that when they end up in the Senate chamber. That's why I just give it a C. I put it in at C, and I think that, it's a pretty good standard, duel. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for me. That is my list of lightsaber duels. Again, I don't think anything should ever qualify for the E or F tier because there's nothing that bad. I think that most of these fights are good to average. You've got a handful of great, and then two, in my opinion, really brilliant ones. And again, my sort of criteria for what makes a duel good and bad is going to be different to yours. So I would like to know what you think of my list and what your, preferences are. What's your rankings? I know that this doesn't encompass every single duel that there's ever been. Specifically, you know, there's nothing from the Mandalorian or the Obi-Wan Kenobi or Ahsoka show. But this is trying to stick mostly to the movies and the major moments up to, you know, sort of 2019. So yeah, let me know what you think. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and I will see you for the next video, which will be focusing on the Bad Batch, which is coming up later this week. So I'll see you for that, folks.